The Chameleon, a Consciousness Manifesto, Volume 2. Before truth comes the disguise. This is the Chameleon, the second awakening on the Consciousness Manifesto journey. Meet Sam, a man who'd mastered the art of blending in. Like the color-shifting reptile, he learned to disappear behind others' opinions and expectations. But when life tore away his camouflage, he was left facing the question no one escapes. Who am I, really? What follows isn't self-help. It's a story alive, reflective, and uncomfortably true. Ready to begin? The Drift. Meet Sam, a 23-year-old taxi driver in London. Easygoing and happy-go-lucky, he never takes life too seriously. Nothing is ever a big deal for him. He loves his daily routine of crisscrossing the city and chatting with passengers, carrying a carefree attitude through it all. You might say he drifts through life like a leaf in the wind, carried whichever way the breeze blows. His parents are Turkish immigrants who settled in the UK a year before he was born. His father drives a cab as well. In those early years, he worked tirelessly, saving enough to send Sam to a private school, believing that growing up among native Britons would give his son a better chance at life. Yet even then, Sam learns early on that he is different. He never forgets one day in primary school, around age 7, when he opens his lunchbox in the cafeteria and the other kids burst into giggles. They jeer at the unfamiliar food and even goad him into saying its Turkish name, just to laugh at how strange it sounds. In that moment, Sam wishes his mom would pack a plain peanut butter and jelly sandwich instead, not because he wants one, but to avoid being their daily entertainment. After that, he found ways to avoid being a target. He started eating lunch in hiding during recess and saved his snacks for lunchtime. It was the first time he changed his colors to blend into his surroundings, even if he didn't realize it then, and it wouldn't be the last. The disguise. As he enters his late teens, Sam's father makes a half-hearted attempt to involve him in their faith. The family isn't strictly religious, aside from the occasional mosque visit or holiday observance. By the time Sam finishes school, no one has ever asked what he wants to do with his life. Instead, his father simply tells him, "Drive cabs like me. It's good money." Lacking direction, and with no one guiding him to explore who he might become, Sam does just that. He follows his father's words, not out of passion, but because it's the path laid out before him. 5 years later, Sam is still at it, ferrying all sorts of people across London. In that time, he discovered a simple formula for pleasing customers and earning generous tips. Agree with everything they say. Political rants, personal opinions, wild theories, Sam would just smile and say, "You're right." Passengers loved it. "You're all right," they'd chuckle, tossing an extra few pounds his way at the end of the ride. One drizzly morning, a visibly drunk man stumbled into Sam's cab. The stench of stale beer and vomit filled the air as Sam forced a polite smile and asked, "Where to?" The man, Steve, slurred out an address clear across the city, a good 45-minute ride. Almost immediately, Steve began to rant about bloody immigrants. He announced that he hated colored people, oblivious to the fact that his driver's family was Turkish. Sam's knuckles tightened on the wheel, but he said nothing and kept driving. He told himself the man was just drunk. Steve went on spewing what sounded like quotes from talk radio. "You know, they take all our jobs and have 8 children each just for the welfare money," he spat out angrily. Sam's stomach knotted at the ugliness in those words. Yet, he did exactly what years of habit had taught him to do. He glanced at Steve in the rearview mirror, met the man's eyes, and nodded in agreement. "Yeah, mate, you're right," Sam lied softly. "That's why I voted for the Conservatives." The tirade continued for the entire ride, and Sam kept up the act, murmuring approval whenever Steve paused for breath. By the time they reached the destination, Sam felt drained and a little sick inside. But Steve beamed, his anger momentarily spent. "Thanks, you're all right," Steve mumbled as he clambered out, tossing a crumpled 20-pound note onto the front seat as a tip. "Thank you. Have a good one," Sam replied, as if the two were old friends. He watched Steve stagger away, then exhaled a long, heavy sigh in the empty cab. That evening, Sam arrived home to find his parents bursting with news. His mother practically dragged him into the living room. "Good news," she beamed. "Your second cousin in Turkey wants to marry you. We've arranged everything." Sam blinked, thinking he must have misheard. "Marriage?" he thought. "I've never even thought about marriage." He worked 6 days a week and had only a couple of friends. It had always just been him and his routine. Seeing his stunned expression, his father clapped a hand on his shoulder. "What else are you going to do?" his father said gruffly. "You're a man now, Sam. It's time to get married." Sam opened his mouth to protest, but no words came. He had never learned to say no. So he nodded meekly. "Okay," he heard himself agree. In a blur, his mother took over. Within days, she had them on a plane to Turkey for a hastily planned wedding. A month later, Sam finds himself standing in a crowded ceremonial hall in Istanbul. He's dressed in unfamiliar traditional clothing, a fitted vest and embroidered jacket over a crisp shirt sweating under the weight of the fabric and the expectations around him. Relatives he's never met guide him through rituals he doesn't understand, instructing him when to bow, when to repeat blessings, when to smile for photos. Hours later, when the last song ends and the guests disperse, Sam finally finds himself back in the hotel room. He welcomes the silence after all the wild theatrics of the day, the first real breath he's taken since morning. He sits on the edge of the bed, his head still ringing from the drums and chatter. He glances down at his palm, where a faint mark of henna remains from the pre-wedding night, a token gesture from a cultural ritual he barely understood. Under the soft lamplight, the fading stain looks like something borrowed that never quite fit. He traces it absently with his thumb, feeling a quiet emptiness where meaning should be. For years, whenever people at school asked about his background or stumbled over his last name, Sam would tell them he was Turkish, as if the word alone carried belonging. But after everything he'd seen today, the dances, the rituals, the words he didn't understand, he realized how foreign it all felt. The culture he was supposed to call his own no longer recognized him, and he no longer recognized it. As he undresses, folding the ceremonial clothes onto the chair, he feels a strange relief wash over him, like he's finally taken off a costume he never truly embraced. The realization sits heavy in his chest, but he says nothing. He just exhales, switches off the light, and goes to bed. There's no honeymoon, no pause to process what's happened, just a flight back to London with his new bride, Zeynep, and then back to work the very next day. Before long, Zeynep was pregnant with their first child. Life fell into a familiar, grinding pattern. By day, Sam still played the agreeable cab driver, appeasing strangers for tips. By night, he tried to be the dutiful Turkish husband his wife expected. Zeynep came from a more traditional background than Sam. She lashed out that he acted too white, that he didn't eat halal meat or honor Turkish customs or prayers. With a baby on the way, her convictions only grew stronger. Sam felt pulled in two directions. When he left home, he put on a Western-friendly face to please his customers. When he returned home, he had to put on a different face to appease his wife. He was living two lives and belonging to neither. For a while, Sam's easygoing nature helped him cope with the contradictions. But each day, it got a little harder. The strain of constantly shape-shifting, agreeing with everyone, adjusting to every situation was quietly eating at him. Sam didn't know it yet, but cracks were forming beneath his smile. He was a chameleon through and through, and the colors were changing faster than he could keep up. As the months passed and Zeynep's pregnancy neared full term, the tension in Sam's life only grew. With her hormones running high, Zeynep scolded him over every little thing. Some evenings, Sam would find himself pausing outside their door, stealing a moment of peace before walking into yet another barrage of complaints. He loved his wife and unborn son, but he dreaded coming home now, knowing what awaited him inside. Every day felt like he was switching between countless incompatible personas. Behind the wheel, Sam became whoever his passengers needed him to be, agreeing, adapting, mirroring their moods for the sake of harmony. Then, at home, he put on yet another face. The dutiful Turkish husband, never quite living up to expectations. The constant shape-shifting took its toll. He felt like an actor changing roles several times a day, never allowed to just be himself. The unease that had been simmering inside him was building toward a boil. Sam felt out of place in both worlds now, at work and at home. He didn't belong anywhere, and it was getting harder to pretend that he did. The shatter. It happened without warning. One afternoon, while Sam was in the middle of a fair, his phone rang. It was his mother, and she was frantic. "There's been an accident," she managed to choke out. "Zeynep was hit by a bus. They've taken her to the hospital." Sam's heart slams against his ribs. He doesn't even remember pulling the car to the curb, only the sound of the tires screeching as he threw it into park. "Get out!" he blurts, barely aware of the startled passenger in the back seat. The next moment, he's already running down the block, through the blur of traffic racing toward the hospital, with tears he doesn't remember starting to fall. When Sam burst into the fluorescent-lit corridor of the emergency ward, he found a knot of relatives huddled together, red-eyed and silent. His mother stepped forward, face crumpling. "She's gone, Sam," she whispered. "Zainab and the baby." Sam's world stopped. Gone? He looked around at the faces of his father, the doctor behind them, all confirming the unspeakable truth. His wife, 8 months pregnant with their son, whom they had already named Amir, was dead. A strangled sound escaped Sam's throat. His knees buckled, hitting the tile floor as if the strength had suddenly drained out of his body. He stared ahead at nothing, eyes unfocused, lungs refusing to draw breath. Moments ago, he had a family, a future. Now, in the span of a phone call, it was all gone. Our life was just beginning. And now, it's over. The thought keeps returning louder, heavier, impossible to silence. "Why? Why is this happening to me?" Sam whispered aloud, his voice raw and broken. There was no answer, only the sound of his mother's sobs and the flat hum of the hospital lights. The days that followed passed in a haze. Sam moved as if underwater, numb, slow, disconnected from reality. There was a funeral, though he barely remembered it. He stood at the graveside, in a daze, as 2 coffins, one heartbreakingly small, were lowered into the earth. After that, he shut himself in his bedroom at his parents' house and fell into a wordless despair. He couldn't eat. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't cry. He simply lay there in the rumpled sheets that still smelled of Zainab's shampoo, staring at the ceiling. His mother left trays of food by the door, gently encouraging him to eat, but he touched none of it. Family and friends came by, offering condolences and prayers, but their voices barely registered. Their good intentions only suffocated him. No one could reach the depth of his pain. After a week of living like a ghost, Sam realized he had to escape, or he would lose his mind. One morning, he mustered the strength to get out of bed, walked into the living room, and announced quietly, "I need to get away for a while." His parents looked at him with concern, but did not protest. With trembling hands, Sam booked a one-way ticket to a tiny Greek island he found on a map somewhere far, isolated, where no one knew him. He packed a small bag and told his family he needed time alone to process what had happened. Then, without much further explanation, Sam left London behind. The silence. Stepping off the ferry onto the Greek island, Sam felt the weight of silence surround him. The island was tiny and remote, just a few hundred locals and a handful of off-season tourists. That was exactly what he wanted. Anonymity, solitude, a place to disappear. He rented a small seaside cabin and immediately withdrew from the world. Days slid by in a dull, dreamlike blur. He slept until noon, walked down to a little cafe for a simple sandwich, then shuffled back to his cabin and hung a "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door. No one bothered him. No one knew him. In the stillness of that cabin, there were no expectations, no voices telling him what to be. There was also no distraction from the emptiness inside. After about 2 weeks of this numb routine, Sam awoke one afternoon with a faint urge to see more than the 4 walls of his room. He ventured down to the beach, a quiet stretch of sand and pebbles where the only sound was the gentle lap of waves. He walked for a long time in the sea breeze, alone with his thoughts. Eventually, he sank down onto the sand and let the question that had been building inside him escape into the open air. What do I do now? There was no answer. Of course, just the rhythmic crash of distant waves. Sam ran a hand through his unkempt hair and tried to imagine his future. Would he return to London and climb back into that taxi, spending his days agreeing with strangers about politics and gossip, pretending everything was fine? The thought made him clench his jaw. He had finally had enough. Enough of people. Enough of the world. But if not London, if not the taxi, then where? Then what? He realized, with a sinking feeling, that he truly didn't know. In 23 years, he had never actually made a major life decision for himself. Every step of his path had been laid out by someone else. His parents, his customers, his wife, his culture. He had always just gone along. Sitting there on that deserted beach, Sam understood that he wasn't just physically alone, he was alone with a stranger. He didn't recognize himself. He had been so many things for so many people. He had no idea who he was when there was no one else around to guide or pressure him. He wasn't truly Turkish, despite his ancestry. He wasn't truly British, despite being born and raised in London. He held no strong opinions of his own. His views had always been a mirror of whomever he was with. Now that the mirrors were gone, he was left with a disquieting question echoing in the silence. Who am I? Sam had no answer. In that empty moment, he realized the painful truth. He didn't know himself at all. The next day, still adrift in confusion, Sam wandered back to the beach. He settled onto a sun-faded bench overlooking the water, his mind a blank beyond the dull ache of grief and aimlessness. After half an hour of solitude, an elderly man shuffled up the path and sat down on the other end of the bench. Sam glanced over. He was local, perhaps in his 70s, with wise, watery eyes and a gentle posture. Good morning, the old man nodded, introducing himself as Nikos. In accented English, Nikos asked where Sam was from. When Sam mumbled a vague answer, Nikos ventured a few words in Turkish, guessing Sam's heritage. But Sam's Turkish was rusty at best, and he barely responded. He didn't want to talk. He didn't want to feel anything. Sensing this, Nikos fell quiet for a while. The two men sat in silence, listening to the waves. Sam hoped the stranger would take the hint and move on, but instead Nikos simply stayed, a calm, unobtrusive presence at Sam's side. Without quite meaning to, Sam lets out a long, heavy breath, the kind of soul-deep sigh that carries more pain than words can express. His shoulders tremble. Nikos notices the younger man's eyes glistening with tears he's fighting to hold back. After a pause, Nikos speaks softly and asks sincerely, "What's wrong, my son?" The simple kindness in that question pierces Sam's heart like a blade. His carefully maintained composure shatters. All the sorrow, fear, and loneliness he's been holding in come surging out. Something inside him breaks open, and a cry escapes uncontrolled, primal, his own voice unrecognizable. In an instant, the old man puts his arms around him, drawing Sam into a firm, paternal embrace. Sam clings to this stranger, as if Nikos were a lifeline. Nikos says nothing. He just pats Sam's back gently, encouraging him in a soothing murmur. "Let it out, son. Let it all out." For a long few minutes, Sam did just that. He cried with a force he hadn't known was in him, soaking Nikos' shirt with tears. Finally, the storm of grief began to subside. Sam pulled back, flushing with embarrassment at his outburst. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," he whispered, wiping his eyes. Nikos shook his head. "Don't apologize." He looked at Sam with earnest concern. Sam realized he hadn't cried like that in years, perhaps ever. In the wake of it, he felt empty and exhausted. He slumped on the bench, staring at the sand. In a small, cracked voice, he confessed, "I'm lost." Nikos gave a gentle, understanding nod and rested a hand on Sam's shoulder. "I know," he said quietly. He didn't offer trite comfort or ask more questions. He simply sat with Sam until the younger man's breathing steadied and a calm settled between them. Gulls cried in the distance. The sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon. After a time, Nikos spoke again. "There's something you should see," he said, eyes thoughtful. "Go to Delphi." "Delphi?" Sam repeated, puzzled. Delphi was an ancient ruins site on the Greek mainland, a tourist attraction. It was the last thing he expected to hear. "I didn't come here to sightsee," Sam muttered, shaking his head. "I came here to be alone." Nikos managed a small smile. "It's not the ruins themselves," he explained, "but at the Temple of Apollo in Delphi, there's an inscription on the stone. Very old words of wisdom. Go read them. It might help you." The old man's tone was earnest, almost urgent. Sam hesitated. The idea of leaving his cocoon of isolation to trek off to some tourist site felt jarring. Yet he could sense that Nikos truly believed this would guide him, and the man had given Sam comfort when he needed it most. Sam found himself trusting Nikos' intuition more than his own at that moment. He nodded faintly. "All right," he said. "I'll go." The awakening. Early the next morning, Sam set out on a ferry and bus journey to Delphi, carrying little more than the clothes on his back. As he traveled, his mind raced with possibilities, half hoping for some miraculous revelation, half convinced this was a fool's errand. By afternoon, he reached the foot of Mount Parnassus, where crowds of tourists were exploring the famous archaeological site. Sam trudged up the path toward the Temple of Apollo. The voices of tour guides and chattering visitors swirled around him. Great people, he thought with a grimace, feeling a flash of irritation at the bustling scene. Still, he pressed on up the marble steps, drawn by the faint hope that Nico's promised insight awaited him at the top. Near the temple's crumbling entrance, a small knot of tourists was gathered, cameras out, peering at something etched into a stone wall. Sam gently pushed through until he stood before the ancient inscription. There, carved into weathered marble, were 2 words in Greek. The translation was posted on a plaque below, "Know thyself." Sam read the words. For a moment, they meant nothing to him. Know thyself. That was it? He had traveled all this way, expecting some profound answer or sign, perhaps a key to unlock hidden wisdom. Yet what he found instead was a mirror, turning his search back on himself. All he got were 2 simple words. A wave of disappointment surged through him. Know thyself? He muttered under his breath. What was that supposed to do for him? Sam read the phrase again, and this time he imagined it spoken in Nikos' warm, steady voice. Know yourself, Sam. He backed away from the wall, running a hand through his hair. This wasn't the straightforward solution he'd been craving. Frustration bubbled up. He started to whisper the phrase to himself, testing it on his tongue. Know thyself? Know myself? The frustration grew sharper. Know myself, he barked, suddenly angry. His voice echoed off the ancient stones. A few nearby tourists cast nervous glances at him, shuffling away as if he might be unwell. Sam realized he must look crazy, talking to himself and scowling at a ruin. He turned on his heel and left the temple, heart pounding with agitation. That evening, Sam was on a bus, headed back to Athens, where he planned to catch the next flight to London. The sun had set, and the bus's dim interior hummed gently as miles of countryside rolled by. Sam slouched in his seat, face pressed to the window. The words, know thyself, looped in his mind, over and over, keeping time with the rhythm of the highway. Sometimes he whispered them. Sometimes he nearly shouted them in his thoughts, as if challenging the universe to explain itself. Know thyself. Know thyself. Somewhere in the darkness of that bus ride, something finally cracked open inside Sam. He had spent days in silence, weeks in despair, months and years running from discomfort. Now, at last, he allowed a beam of clarity to pierce through. He faced the very question he had been avoiding for so long. The question that now loomed larger than any other. Who am I? Sam's eyes brimmed with tears as a flood of realizations rushed in. He saw himself as a boy at school, pretending he didn't have a Turkish heritage he should be ashamed of. He saw himself as a teenager at home, pretending he hadn't been altered by the Western world outside. He saw himself as a man in a taxi, agreeing with bigots and with liberals alike on the same day, just to get tips. And he saw himself as a husband, nodding along to cultural expectations that never felt like his own. Scene after scene of his life replayed in his mind, different faces, different places, but always one thing the same. Sam was whatever others wanted him to be. A surge of rage and anguish welled up inside him. He clenched his fists and, under his breath, growled, "Who the fuck am I?" The words came out in English, raw and vulgar, echoing in the quiet of the near-empty bus. In that moment, it was as if Sam was demanding an answer from the depths of his own soul. Only one answer came, and it emerged as barely a whisper. "I don't know who I am." Sam admitted it freely, his tears spilling now. He truly didn't know. He never had. It was a terrifying realization, but also strangely freeing. For the first time, he confronted the truth that had always haunted him beneath the surface. He was confused. Yes, but at least now he was aware of the confusion. For the rest of that journey, Sam sat quietly with this truth, watching his reflection in the dark window glass. He didn't yet recognize the man who gazed back, but he resolved, in that quiet turning point, that he would try to find out. Sam's flight touched down in London on a gray morning. As he waited for his luggage at the carousel, a delay was announced 2 hours due to an equipment malfunction. He realized he had no clear plan for what to do next, but he did know one thing with absolute certainty. He was not going back to driving that taxi and living the way he had before. Never again would he spend his days parroting other people's opinions just to be liked. If he returned to that routine, he knew he would be sealing himself back into the very cage he'd just broken out of. Sitting in the terminal, Sam pulled out his phone. He needed help, someone who could guide him in discovering who he really was. I'm not broken, he thought, just lost. I don't need a shrink to fix me. I need someone who can help me find me. He searched online for personal development and coaching services. One listing caught his eye. A life coach who specialized in identity and purpose. The only catch: the coach, James, was based in Edinburgh, Scotland. Sam's heart skipped with nervous excitement. Edinburgh was hundreds of miles away, a city he'd never been to. But what was that compared to the journey he'd already made? In the past, he would have hesitated or asked someone else's opinion. This time, he made the decision then and there, entirely on his own. I need to find myself, and it's worth a shot, he resolved. He booked a train north that same day. As soon as he arrived in Edinburgh, Sam went straight from the station to the address of the life coach's office, suitcase still in hand. He knocked on the door, and a tall man with kind eyes opened it. "James?" Sam asked. The man smiled. "You must be Sam. Come in." He gestured at Sam's luggage. "Going somewhere else after this?" Sam shook his head and stepped inside. "No," he said quietly. "I'm here now. I've arrived." It was a statement of intention, as much as geography. James seemed to recognize the determination in Sam's voice. He ushered Sam into a cozy office, and they sat down to talk. Sam spoke haltingly at first, admitting that he felt lost in his own life and desperate to change. James listened intently. "I can help you," he said. "But remember, true change takes time and work. There's no simple formula I can give you. This isn't a quick fix. It's a journey, and it will be different for you than for anyone else." "I understand," Sam replied. "I'm ready to do whatever it takes, for however long it takes." And he meant it. For the first time, he wasn't looking for an easy answer. He was looking for the real answer. They began that very week. Sam rented a small room in a nearby motel and committed to 3 coaching sessions with James every single week. Session by session, layer by layer, Sam unpacked the story of his life. He dredged up memories of eating lunch alone as a child to avoid ridicule. He talked about the way he'd let his parents choose his path and how he'd slid passively into driving a taxi. He even confronted the guilt and relief tangled up in his feelings about Zainab, how she had challenged him for not knowing himself, and how he both resented and now appreciated that fact. It was exhausting, difficult work. There were days when Sam left James's office emotionally drained, went back to his motel, and slept for hours. But bit by bit, he sensed something shifting inside him, a new clarity, beginning to form out of the fog. One afternoon, near the end of a session, James looked at Sam thoughtfully. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "It might seem simple, but it's important." Sam nodded, bracing himself. James asked, "What do you want from life?" Sam opened his mouth and found he had no answer. He had never truly asked himself that. I don't know," he finally admitted, feeling a bit ashamed. James gave him a gentle smile. "That's okay," he said. "Keep that question in front of you. When you find the answer, you'll find yourself." Sam left that session feeling unsettled. The question gnawed at him incessantly. What do I want from life? He carried it with him through the evening and into the night. Lying in his motel bed, he stared at the ceiling, wide awake as the hours ticked by. Midnight passed. Around 4 a.m, Sam suddenly sat up, heart pounding. In the quiet darkness, an answer rose from deep within, clear as a bell. "I don't want to be agreeable anymore," he whispered aloud. "I don't want to just tell people they're right all the time. I want to have my own opinions, my own preferences. I want to be me." He said the words again, stronger this time, and felt something unlock inside him. It was like taking a first breath after being underwater. Sam realized he was smiling, truly smiling, for the first time in as long as he could remember. He felt as if he had just recovered a piece of himself that had been buried deep down. In that moment, Sam began to emerge from his shell. It was the start of something new, something real. He had glimpsed his true color, the unique shade of personality that was his alone, and it was bright and bold. There was more work ahead, of course. He still needed to explore his likes and dislikes, to discover what beliefs and values he held when he wasn't trying to please anyone. But now, he had a direction. He had a spark of selfhood that was entirely his. At their next meeting, Sam shared this breakthrough with James. The coach's face lit up with pride. They spent their final sessions channeling that momentum, making plans for how Sam could continue growing and honoring his authentic self. When it came time for Sam to return to London, James offered him a parting thought. He pulled out a small note card and wrote a quote on it by hand, then handed it to Sam with a handshake. On the card, in neat cursive, were the words, "Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans." John Lennon, from the song Beautiful Boy. Sam tucked the card safely into his wallet. He had no intention of forgetting the lessons of these past months. The return. Back in London, on a crisp morning, nearly 5 months since the tragedy, Sam made one important stop before anything else. He visited the cemetery where Zainab and little Amir were buried. Kneeling, he placed a bouquet of fresh flowers on the grave. A soft breeze stirred the leaves as he stood there in reflection. In his mind, he could almost hear Zainab's voice teasing him, as she once had. "You don't even know if you're white or Turkish." He closed his eyes and bowed his head. "You were right," he whispered, "but I'm learning who I am now." Instead of filling him with sadness or shame, Zainab's words now fueled him with determination. Sam walked out of the graveyard, feeling a quiet resolve. He would live in a way that honored himself and the love he'd shared with those he'd lost. He would become a man his wife and son could be proud of. A man he could be proud of. When Sam finally returned to his parents' house, they greeted him at the door in tears. They had been worried sick. In his time away, Sam had only given them the occasional brief call to say he was safe at a given location. Now he stood before them, a changed man. He embraced his mother and father, thanking them for all their support and love through the years. Then he took a step back, looked them in the eyes, and said gently, "I'm so grateful for everything you've done, and I need to continue on my own now. I need to be my own person and truly find myself." His parents exchanged a glance, sensing the resolve in their son's voice. He was not the unsure boy who he'd been 5 months ago. His father nodded with a trembling smile. "We understand," he said. "Thank you for telling us. Go be yourself, my son." They did not argue or press him with questions. In their hearts, they knew this day would come. They were proud of him, even as they let him go. And so, with his family's blessing, Sam resumed working and living in London, this time on his own terms. On his first day back driving his cab, by a strange twist of fate, the very same Steve who had once embodied the ugliness of Sam's old life climbed into the back seat of his taxi. Steve was only mildly drunk this time, but he recognized Sam immediately. "Sam, my friend, how are you?" he boomed, as if they were drinking buddies. Sam glanced at him in the mirror. He feels a flicker of the old reflex to paste on a pleasant grin and play along, but he resisted it. Instead, Sam answered evenly, "I'm fine. Where are you headed today, Steve?" His tone was polite but curt, nothing like the overly friendly pushover Steve remembered. Steve looked surprised. He gave Sam an address, and an awkward silence fell. Uncertain how to break it, Steve began doing what he always did. He launched into a familiar rant. Perhaps he assumed it would thaw the atmosphere. "You know," Steve drawled, "this country is going to hell. All these foreigners and freeloaders—" "Steve," Sam interrupted firmly, his voice calm but unmistakably authoritative. "I'm going to stop you right there." Steve blinked in astonishment. In all the times over the years that he'd ridden with Sam, he'd never heard a single word of pushback. Sam met his eyes in the rearview mirror. "I'm here to drive you to your destination, and that's all. I don't want to hear your political views this morning. If you'd rather vent about that, I can let you out here, and you can find another cab. It's up to you." For a moment, the only sound is the low rumble of the engine. Steve's mouth hangs open. He's utterly flabbergasted. The man in the driver's seat barely resembles the agreeable yes man he used to know. Steve is dumbstruck. He truly doesn't know how to respond. As he struggles for words, a flush creeps up his neck. "Listen, mate," he starts. But the words falter halfway out. Sam doesn't flinch. His eyes stay on the road, calm and focused. "I can let you out if you want," he says evenly, glancing over his shoulder as the cab rolls to a gentle stop at a red light. His voice is steady, unyielding. Steve raises his hands. No, it's fine." He clears his throat, trying to recover his composure. Didn't mean anything by it. Guess I talk too much sometimes, that's all. He forces a short laugh, eyes darting to the window. Anyway, no worries. Sam nods and continues the drive in silence. The city hums around them, lights, motion, the steady rhythm of the road. Behind him, Steve sits quietly, unsure what to say next. In those few minutes, Sam feels something settle inside him. It isn't triumph, and it isn't anger. It's clarity. For once, he hasn't folded to keep the peace. He's spoken his truth, calmly and without apology. When they reach their destination, Steve leans forward and places the fare on the console. "Keep the change," he says softly, barely above a whisper. Sam gives a small nod. "All right, take care." Steve hesitates at the door, gives a small nod, and steps out into the street without another word. Sam watches him go, the faint echo of the engine in his ears. He realizes it isn't Steve who's changed, it's him. The man behind the wheel is no longer trying to blend in. He's found his voice, and it's finally his own. Pulling back into traffic, Sam feels a warm, quiet satisfaction. He had stood up for himself calmly and without fear. It struck him that this moment was a perfect mirror of the one nearly 11 months ago, when Steve had first spewed his toxicity and Sam had swallowed it. Only now, Sam had broken the pattern. He had met the situation as his true self, not as a chameleon blending in. From that day on, people around Sam could see the change. He carried himself differently. He was no longer the color shifter who would blend into any shade just to avoid conflict. He had his own convictions, his own tastes, and he wasn't shy about them. If someone pushed against his values or tried to pull him back into his old habits, Sam would smile and politely hold his ground. He knew what he stood for now, and he wasn't about to give that up. In time, even those who had known him for years came to accept and appreciate the new Sam. He had finally earned something far more precious than a big tip or a superficial compliment. He had earned self-respect. As he drove on through the London streets that morning, Sam allowed himself a small smile of triumph. He knew this was just the beginning of a lifelong journey of self-discovery. He didn't have every answer, not yet, but he was okay with that. He had found his voice, and he wasn't afraid to use it anymore. He was done changing colors, just to blend into someone else's world. Whatever came next, he would face it as himself, in his own true colors. He had broken the old pattern, and in doing so, he had begun to create a new one that was entirely his own. Conclusion. What you've just witnessed, through Sam's journey from the carefree ignorance is bliss frame of mind to a newfound clarity through self-awareness, is a quiet truth many of us avoid. Sometimes, like water, we take the path of least resistance. By being agreeable, telling people what they wanted to hear, and following what was expected of him, Sam avoided conflict. But in doing so, he also avoided himself. He was, as we saw in the beginning, a leaf in the wind. Yet ignorance, though it may feel like bliss, is only a fleeting illusion, one that lets you win for a moment by conforming to those around you. But when tragedy struck, Sam discovered the hidden cost of that comfort. He had no foundation of self to stand on, nothing to keep him grounded when the storms of life struck. Over time, that same comfort of avoidance takes a quiet toll. You begin to lose your sense of self, or never build one at all. Because ignorance, even when it feels safe, is still ignorance. And it can only dissolve through awareness, through the courage to truly know yourself. But awareness alone isn't enough. What would have happened if Sam hadn't acted on it? If, during that 2-hour delay at the airport, he had simply picked up his bag and gone home, returning to his taxi, to the same routines, the same quiet emptiness? His awareness might have remained just that, a thought, not a turning point. Sam's courage to seek help was the defining moment of his story, the instant when awareness turned into action. That single decision to reach out, instead of retreat, changed the course of his life. It was the hardest step of all, the first step that moves you beyond realization into movement, beyond knowing into becoming. Sam's turning point came at the darkest hour of his young life, when he lost his wife and unborn child. In that unbearable silence, he discovered what it meant to be alone. Not lonely, but alone with his thoughts. Yet even those thoughts had no identity, because he didn't yet know who he was. When the kind old man, Nikos, showed him compassion, he didn't hand him answers. Instead, he guided Sam inward, toward the one place where truth had always been waiting. Nikos, a man who had weathered many storms, understood that once you know yourself, you begin to find the answers life has been trying to show you all along. Only when Sam took life seriously, when he began to sincerely seek understanding, did his ears open to truth. The chameleon reminds us that self-knowledge gives us strength, a voice, and the courage to stand in our own truth. But remember, this story is only powerful if you let it stir something in you. Ask yourself the hard questions, not from judgment, but from awareness. Do you have your own voice, or have you let someone else speak through you? This is the essence of the chameleon. Be your own person. Don't live vicariously through others. Have your own opinions, your own voice, your own truth, and stand for it. Because if you don't stand for something, you'll end up falling for anything. This is the beginning of something great. The first step toward becoming you.